individuals all have different viewpoints about what feeling well means. If you are a highly body-centered person, then looking after your body through movement and nutrition might be a focal point for how you feel well in the world. And mental stimulation for people who lead primarily through their mental faculties. They want to be well by giving healthy stimulation to that mental aspect. And for me, as one who sees herself as a mystic, embracing the personal experience of the spiritual journey and remembering the truth of who I am, my spiritual practices are the first and foremost way of me resting into well-being. And I was looking at a video the other day by Bruce Lipton, the author of Biology of Belief, and he was talking about how the science is showing that we use 5% of our conscious mind during the day. The conscious mind is the creative mind. It focuses on our wishes, dreams, and desires. And the other 95% of the time is our subconscious mind, which is the mind that is programmed from the third trimester of pregnancy, when we're in our mama's womb, until around the age of 7. During that time, we're in a hypnotic state, and what's happening around us imprints the programming into the computer system of our mind and body. And that for most people, the majority of those subconscious programs are self-limiting, they're self-sabotaging, they're negative, because we've been picking up the judgmental programs that are around us. And it was interesting, he said, when we are in the thinking process, when our brain is engaged in thinking, the conscious mind, the creative mind, can no longer drive the vehicle that we're in because we're thinking. And so the body has to go onto automatic. And that's great for habits that are formed, such as playing an instrument, learning to walk, learning to speak a language, having our heart be beated by our biological system and our breathing being automatic. But when it comes to those subconscious patterns that were picked up by the people around us and the circumstances around us that are limiting, then how do we access that subconscious for reprogramming? And Bruce talks about 3 ways: hypnosis, repetition, and doing energy practices to change the energetic system, such as emotional frequency technique, if you've ever done any of the tapping, body talk, etc. And so I was thinking, well, what is my definition of well-being during this time of the COVID-19 and all the aspects, the multi-layered aspects, it seems to me, of what's going on, where many of us are in an altered state of activity in our life. And I recognize that what I do inside of me is necessary to take care of business here so that I can outflow what's happening here out into my world. So as within, so without. And the primary practices that I use are prayers in stillness and prayer through speaking to others, and listening to prayerful affirmations in a relaxed state so that it can go into my subconscious mind. Those are really primary to my sense of well-being. Because I've come to realize that if I'm looking after my nutrition and I'm looking after my physical activity, my physical need for movement, but I am not looking after what's going on inside here, then my well-being gets sabotaged by what's happening in this subconscious aspect of myself that is running these old programs. And Greg Braden has a book called Walking Between the Worlds, and he shares the teachings of the Essene priesthood, which many people say Yeshua, Jesus, was a part of, and that we are here working 3 primary programs of fear of abandonment, fears around self-worth, and fears around trust, and that we use the relationships in our world to work out that scenario. So if I'm coming to those fears and to my relationships from fear-based programming rather than heart-centered programming, then no matter what my conscious wishes are for my life, as soon as I get into the thinking process, I get taken over by my subconscious programming. And so if my subconscious programming is biased towards self-sabotage and fear-based programming, then it doesn't matter what my consciousness says it wants. I will be operating in the world from the subconscious. So prayer, in Unity, we look at prayer as remembering the truth of who we really are, remembering our true divine nature. So in prayer, whether I am sitting in silence, oh, by the way, I got to turn on my timer so I don't go over here, excuse me. Whether we're in silence, creating space for our divine mind to connect into our conscious awareness, creating stillness in the busyness of our modern day world where we tend to be doing as the focus of our day. When we create that space and the silence so that we can hear that still small voice. If you're a follower of Abraham Hicks, she recommends 15 minutes of silent meditation every day to set ourself to source, our source of being. If you've read Think and Grow Rich, the number one thing that Napoleon Hill found with people that he did his study on is that they went into the silence. They quieted the human mind and opened up to the infinite potential of divine mind, of the intelligent design, whether you call it the quantum field or the divine matrix. And in that silence, we are open and receptive to receiving the revelations and the inspirations. And so that's not the only form of meditation that I choose to use. I enjoy listening to guided meditations, and especially when I can actually let myself be in a relaxed state. I understand that there's a benefit to listening to inspirational audios in the background while I am doing something else. When my body can be still and can be relaxed, and I can take my mind from the doing state into the receiving state, then I open up to the hypnagogic state where the subconscious can receive the messages. And so not only am I listening to meditative audios, I'm listening to inspirational music and watching inspirational movies. I'm careful about, I choose to be full of care in what I spend my time listening to and watching, because I recognize it gets imprinted into my subconscious. I choose not to watch mainstream news, hardly ever watch mainstream news. I get my news through other people showing things up on my Facebook feed, etc. And then I get an intuitive hit if I'm to follow that and watch a bit of the mainstream news to get a handle on what's going on. I get curious about alternative news resources, and I'm learning how to hold everything I receive with a sense of equanimity, because there are so many viewpoints about what's going on out in our world right now. I do believe there are many layers of agendas, and I am choosing to remember that I and everyone else are of the one source, the one power, and the one presence that is outworking in this world. And because we are all expressions of that one power and one presence, we are inherently good. And that if we are working from these subconscious patterns that have been imprinted in us, the majority of them of a negative bent, according to people like Bruce Lipton, then we're all operating from these fears of abandonment and fears around self-worth and fears around trust, especially not being able to trust ourselves. And so one of my practices is to choose to cultivate a container of loving kindness and compassion for myself and others. That we're all really doing the best we can in the moment with the version and vision of life that we're experiencing in the moment. And if that's from these old fear-based patterns, then until we wake up from that, we're all still going on that old programming. And so I have a practice of looking at people and silently saying, hello, God. Hello, God. Hello, God, whether I'm walking down the street, driving in my car, sometimes looking in my rearview mirror, looking at my eyes and saying, hello, God, and then returning to others. Hello, God, thank you for being a part of my day. Hello, God, thank you for being a part of my life. Hello, God, thank you for being my teacher in this moment. And other ways that I cultivate well-being is through the breath. Psychologists recognized years ago that the first thing we do when we're under stress is we restrict the breath. We shut the breath down, and that creates tension in the system, in the body, in the mind, in the emotion. And so using breath consciously, and thank goodness it's a subconscious response, so we don't have to think about breathing. We wouldn't be able to pay attention to other things outside if we had to think of every breath beated for us. Thank you, subconscious heartbeat mechanism. But when we pay attention to the breath and we make it conscious and we can pay attention to it, then we can loosen up the tension. And when we pay attention to our emotional feelings and our physical sensations through the breath, and we breathe into the physical sensations and out from the physical sensations, we breathe into the emotion and out from the emotion, and we let the breath bring movement and create spaciousness, then we can shake up and loosen and release emotions that were repressed and suppressed that cause tension and pain in the body. And another way that I use a practice is to do some Qigong and Dawn yoga practices, shaking the body. If you've ever done any of the Qigong, moving the body with ease, shaking up the old energy so we can be shaken apart to be put together anew, releasing old tensions. Tapping on the body, on the meridian lines, can release old energy and harmonize the energetic system. I practice taking ownership of my own energy system, recognizing I have an energy bubble. And when I feel disconnected from the earth, I don't feel very safe on this earth. So I have a practice to ensure that I feel connected down into the earth, that I have a right to take up the energies from the earth, to be supported by the earth. I command that I am connected to what I would call heaven or the divine matrix or the quantum field, that I envision that I'm in a pillar of light and that the energy of the divine creation of source is feeding me and supporting me. I command that my super consciousness, my divine mind, and my conscious mind, and my subconscious mind are communicating together. And I practice having my mind come into resonance with my heart. The Heart Math Institute, through the Coherence Project, has shown that when we come into coherence and resonance with the love of our heart, and we lead with our heart, we follow the way of the heart, and we bring our mind to be in sacred service to the heart, then I can live more and more as a love-centered human being rather than a fear-based human being. My primary practice is to remember I am the I am that I am. And the circumstances of my life that kick me into all the fear-based emotions are my experience of the moment, but they are not my truth of being. And no matter how often I get knocked out of the eye of the storm, where we cultivate being the I, the capital I am in the midst of the storm, I remind myself that I can choose again to move into being the eye of the storm, to remember the truth of who I am, to remember the truth of who everyone in my world is. And I can choose again and again and again to return to love, and to have my actions that I'm choose to take consciously. I can have that choice made from the foundation of love rather than the foundation of the fear-based programming. And I can take ownership of reprogramming my subconscious so that I am living the way of the heart.